Some betrayals don't arrive with shouting. They show up under warm kitchen lights and family talks and a smile that says you're safe, right before the floor gives way. And when the people who raised you treat your future like spare change, the pain isn't just losing money, it's realizing you were never supposed to ask for a seat at your own table. Tonight's story isn't here so we can cheer at someone's downfall, and it's not here so we can pick a villain and feel superior. If we step into it with a little quiet, we'll see how loyalty can be used like a leash, how silence gets rewarded until it breaks you, and how a dream can be built from someone else's sacrifice without a second thought. Sometimes the most brutal moments happen between bites of dinner with napkins folded neatly while your heart is screaming. So stay with me for a minute. This is the story of Archer Wynn, whose parents bought his golden sister her dream house right after draining his $120K MBA fund, and how justice, karma, and one ruthless uncle turned that private betrayal into something the whole town couldn't ignore. Before I share the story, I want to know you are here with me. Just say listening in the comments or tell me where you're watching from. I love hearing how far my story can reach. Sometimes even the smallest connection can make a story feel heard. Thank you. And now, here's my story. If you've ever been the strong one in your family, the one who gets used because you don't fall apart, subscribe and stay with me, because what happened next taught me that silence is exactly what people like this count on. My name is Archer Wynn, and I'm about to tell you how justice, karma, and my uncle's ruthless plan gave me my future back. I don't believe in gut feelings. I believe in proof. Timelines, screenshots, numbers. That's why I keep things like this old box, every letter my grandmother ever mailed me stacked by postmark and tied with a plain black string. It's not just nostalgia. It's how I survive. I plan. I prepare. I keep receipts for things other people let slide, including love. Tonight I was rereading one of her last letters. Charlotte was quiet, the usual hum of traffic outside my apartment gone because of the rain. The letter had that familiar scent of lavender and dry paper. She'd written again the phrase she used so often, "It's become the compass of my life." Education is the only inheritance no one can steal. It was dated 2 months before she passed, the same season my grandfather had died the year before. I hadn't really read them closely until after the funeral, when the house was packed up and the silence got loud. She and Grandpa had been deliberate people, gritty, proud Pennsylvanians who believed in order and effort. Their estate wasn't flashy, but it was principled. When the will was read in Pittsburgh, it was clean and sharp like every letter she ever wrote. Dad and Mom got the house and part of the savings. Tinsley, my sister, received heirloom jewelry and the family's silver. And me, I was granted a $120,000 MBA trust fund, held in my parents' name until I needed it. Clearly stated, irrevocable. I didn't even question it at the time. I had no reason to. That was the kind of people my grandparents were. And frankly, I never imagined my parents would touch it. I was wrong. But back then, I still believed in that line between what's yours and what's mine. Tinsley was always the golden one. Ever since we were kids, she was showered in approval while I was left to figure it out. When I got a full scholarship to UNC, Dad barely looked up from his phone. When I landed my first promotion in my second year out of college, Mom called it cute. But the day Tinsley said she wanted to pivot into home staging, they were over the moon. Bought her a camera, a branding package, and later a rental space she never used. They don't hate me, they just expect me to be fine without them. And I was. I am. That's the narrative. Archer's okay. Archer's got it handled. Archer doesn't need anything. But that MBA fund. It wasn't a need, it was a promise. And now, it's time. At 31, I've hit that glass ceiling at work. Everyone on the leadership track has an MBA. The company even nudged me gently. If you're thinking of B school, the next application cycle is key. I've mapped it out: GMAT essays, consultant fees, application rounds, every cost, every deadline. I'm not asking for help. I'm ready to execute a plan. All I need is the trust to be used for its intended purpose. I brought it up over dinner at my parents' place in Ballantyne. It's a suburban dream out there, all tidy hedges and HOA rules just outside Charlotte. Tinsley and her fiancé Evan were already talking about houses. It just feels like throwing money away every month, she sighed, pouring more wine. Renting is basically lighting a match to your paycheck. Mom nodded, sympathetic. You kids deserve to own something. Build equity, stability. I cleared my throat. Speaking of building, do you have the current balance of the MBA fund? I'm finalizing budgets for GMAT prep and applications. There was a flicker, just a pause. Dad looked away, then said, Well, we'd have to check. Mom jumped in. Don't stress that right now, honey. Just focus on nailing the GMAT. When you need it, we'll figure it out. Except... That wasn't right. This wasn't some random question. It was a specific ask about a fund they were legally holding. A simple number should have come fast. Instead, their tone was murky, dismissive. I didn't push then. I just smiled. Noted it. Later, as I passed through the upstairs hallway, I noticed something subtle. A drawer in Dad's office slightly ajar. Envelopes shifted. I'd seen that bank statement before, now it was gone from the usual spot. And downstairs, when I walked past Mom, she instinctively flipped her phone screen down. I left with that tight feeling in my chest. That scratch of something not quite right. It wasn't suspicion yet, but I wasn't just asking anymore. I was watching. And I made a choice that night back at my apartment in Charlotte, sitting at my desk with her letters around me. I was going to ask again. Not casually, not softly. This time, I'd demand a real answer. Because that fund, it's not just a number, it's a line. And I have a sinking feeling someone crossed it. I spent the next morning like a man building a case. I opened a new folder on my desktop, MBA Trust Inquiry. I created a spreadsheet. Columns for date, message, response, status. If they were going to dodge me again, I'd have the receipts this time. I wasn't going to make this emotional. I was going to make it official. First step, text message. Hey Mom, just need confirmation of the MBA fund balance this week. Finalizing budgets. Would appreciate having the number by Friday. Clear, respectful, reasonable. Her response. Let's talk about it soon. Maybe this weekend. I added it to the spreadsheet. No number given. Deferred response. By Wednesday, nothing. Thursday, silence. Friday morning, I sent a follow-up. No reply. That Saturday, I drove back to Ballantyne. This time, I wasn't making small talk. I sat down across from them in the sunroom and said it flat out. I need the balance. It's time. I've already started the application process. Dad rubbed the back of his neck. Mom gave me that practiced, wounded look. Archer, you always make everything so formal. It's family. And this fund, I said, voice even, was a legal inheritance. With a purpose. I'm not asking for help. I'm enforcing an agreement. They glanced at each other. And then it came out. Slipped out of my mother's mouth like it wasn't the bomb it was. We used it, she said simply. Just a portion. For Tinsley's down payment. They needed it fast. I stared at her. Excuse me, it's not gone, Dad added quickly. Just repurposed. Tinsley needed a jump start. You're always okay, Archer. You don't need help like she does. My throat went dry. That fund was designated for education, not for anyone's mortgage. Mom tilted her head, smiling like she was being reasonable. Well, you can always take out a loan. That's what most people do. I felt something shift in me. How much is left? They hesitated. Looked at each other again. Then Dad sighed. We've been helping her. Monthly. It's down to about 12 grand. I sat still. That number echoed in my skull. 12,000. From 120. I thought I'd be angry. I thought I'd explode. Instead, I felt hollow. Then I saw it. A printout poking out from under a stack of mail. Bank transfer history. Dozens of little withdrawals, like dripping a bucket dry. This wasn't a one-time emergency. They'd planned this. They'd siphoned the fund piece by piece. Quiet. Deliberate. You've been doing this for months, I said quietly. This wasn't a favor. It was theft. Before they could answer, Tinsley's name lit up my mom's phone. She answered on speaker. "I told Evan we're finalizing the inspection next week," she chirped. "It's so exciting, first house I cut in. You used my MBA fund to pay for your dream house, Tinsley." There was a pause. "Then, Archer, it's not like that. I need stability. This is for our family's future." "You mean your future?" She sighed dramatically. "We're a family. Sometimes you give a little so everyone can move forward." That was the story. That was the spin. The noble sacrifice. The emotional manipulation. I stared at the three of them, suddenly realizing this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a structure. A system. I was the mule. The reliable one. And they assumed I'd stay quiet because that's what I'd always done. "I'm getting a lawyer," I said, standing up. They laughed. Actually laughed. "Don't be dramatic," Dad muttered. "Do you even know what lawyers cost?" Mom said. "Archer, this is not the hill you want to die on." But they were wrong. Because this wasn't about money anymore. It was about power, and they just showed me they thought I had none. That night back in Charlotte, I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I opened a new tab. Typed "trust violation legal advice, North Carolina." Then I picked up my phone and called my uncle, the one who doesn't like to lose. The day after they stole my future, I stopped being their son. Not out of rage, out of necessity. I woke up in Miles' guest room with my jaw locked shut and a laptop open on my knees. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I made folders, screenshots, voicemails, timestamps, every text from my mother that dodged responsibility, every vague sentence from my father that quietly admitted it. I built a timeline from the day I asked about the fund to the moment they confessed it was gone. I color-coded it. I highlighted every phrase that implied it wasn't theft, it was support. We thought Tinsley needed it more right now. "It's still family money, sweetheart. Don't turn this into something it's not." I turned every line into something it was. Evidence. The next step was simple. I needed leverage, and I couldn't get it by yelling. I needed two things: someone who knew systems and someone who could fund a war. I went back to Charlotte Uptown under the pretense of business as usual. My mentor, Graham Halstead, had always said I had a mind for structure and a heart too soft for conflict. I planned to prove him wrong. When I asked for a private meeting, he gave me an hour in his glass-walled office. I walked in with 3 documents, the clause in my grandmother's will, earmarking my MBA fund, a printout of the message where my mother called it a necessary reallocation, and the timeline. I handed them over without flinching. Graham didn't respond emotionally. He flipped through each page with the silence of a man reading a deposition. "Who controlled the money?" he asked. "Was it a trust, a bank account?" "Were you the beneficiary on paper?" I answered calmly. "It was held by my parents per Grandma's request. I was told the full amount, $120K, would be released when I was accepted to grad school, and they spent it on a down payment for Tinsley's house, without telling me. Until it was too late." He tapped the will clause. "This isn't just a family betrayal. If that fund was legally yours per the will, this is a fiduciary breach. And possibly a civil offense. I already knew that. But hearing it from someone whose advice had built my early career made it feel real. Validated. Graham didn't offer sympathy. He offered strategy. Talk to a probate lawyer. Today, I'll connect you with someone who knows this terrain. That's how I met Marisol Chen. Calm voice, ruthless focus. She didn't ask if I was okay. She asked if I had copies of the original will, any letters from my grandmother, or notes mentioning the fund. I did. All of it. Marisol told me one sentence that changed everything. If they were entrusted to hold that money for a specific purpose and knowingly redirected it, we're looking at potential fiduciary misconduct. Not just bad parenting. I realized then I didn't need to be rich to fight back. I just needed to touch the right pressure point. That night I called Uncle Calder. I didn't ask for help. I presented him with facts, timeline, screenshots, the will. And what I wanted: full restoration of the fund, legal accountability, and no private settlements. Calder didn't blink. "I'll pay for your legal support," he said. "But you play by my rules. His rules were clear. No emotional confrontations. No replying to texts or calls from my parents. No private meetings. No off-record conversations. Every interaction had to go through lawyers. Every word had to be documented. I agreed without hesitation. Then Calder asked for everything. Send me every document you have. Scanned letters, old envelopes, that handwritten birthday card from her that mentioned the MBA. Anything. I spent hours digging through shoeboxes and file folders. In one envelope labeled Health Power of Attorney, I found something that froze me, a photocopy of a POA document from the year before Grandma died, naming my father as her agent when she became unable to manage affairs. I didn't know what I was looking at yet, but I knew what it could mean. The next morning, Marisol called with a chilling question. Have you ever seen documents where your parents signed anything on your grandmother's behalf before her passing? I paused. I think so. My dad once bragged that he handled some financial stuff when she was too weak to write checks. Her voice sharpened. If they were making decisions under POA while redirecting assets, this may be bigger than one fund. We may need to look at her entire estate. I walked out of my apartment that evening, my phone buzzing with 5 missed calls from Mom. I didn't answer. I sent everything POA, copy letters, timelines to Calder and Marisol. Then I asked one question in my email: if they started moving money before she died. What else did they take? The gloves came off quietly. No yelling, no breaking glass, just a chain of emails, signatures, and silence that would eventually drown them. First, I signed the legal documents. I gave Marisol full authorization to represent me. I handed over everything: my copy of the will, text chains, voice memos, and even the paper napkin where my mom had scribbled a breakdown of future family plans over coffee last fall. She circled the number $120K like it was Monopoly money. Marisol asked me to write a statement. Just facts. No anger, no adjectives. Write it like a police report, she said. What you knew when you knew it. Then came Dana Klein, the forensic accountant. She didn't ask how I felt. She asked for access to any and all banking details my parents may have ever mentioned in passing. Which banks they used. Which ones Grandma used. What account names I remembered. Dates. Even old login screens if I'd seen them. You're not suing your parents, she said. You're conducting a financial autopsy on your grandmother's trust. Her words stuck. Within 72 hours, Dana sent a message that made my blood run cold. She'd begun reconstructing the movement of funds. It wasn't one withdrawal, she wrote. It was a pattern. Small transfers. Monthly. Across almost a year. My stomach turned. It wasn't just a betrayal, it was premeditated. Then the first counterattack came. A voicemail from my father's attorney offering a family solution. We're prepared to repay a portion of the MBA fund, say $60,000, with the understanding that Archer ceases all legal proceedings and agrees to keep the matter private. Calder laughed when he heard it. We don't do half apologies, he told them. Repay the full amount with interest, legal fees, and investigative costs. Or we go to court. That was the first time I realized Calder wasn't just helping me. He was enjoying this. But things escalated faster than I expected. A distant cousin texted me, "Hey, just heard you're helping Tinsley with her house. That's amazing of you." My jaw locked. I hadn't told anyone, which meant my parents were already spinning a new narrative, one where I was the generous brother willingly funding the dream. Marisol's response was immediate. They're planting witnesses. Screenshot every message. This is narrative warfare now. I moved out of my apartment and stayed full-time at Miles's place. Calder hired a PI, nothing invasive, just someone to document any unexpected visits or attempts to contact me. I filed a request with my building to deny access to my parents. The conflict had left the dinner table. It was now strategy, surveillance, and subpoenas. Then came the message from Tinsley. She emailed me, soft, emotional, full of pastel words. I didn't know where the money came from. Mom and Dad just said they had savings. I thought maybe you'd offered, but I never asked. I was almost moved, until she mentioned the exact amount of the first transfer. A figure only someone watching the account or orchestrating the deal would know. Marisol's tone shifted. She's trying to shield herself, but if she knew enough to reference that transfer, we may have a case for knowing participation. And just when I thought I couldn't be more nauseated, Dana called again. She had one question. Do you recall if your grandmother ever formally revoked the POA before she passed? Because based on the bank records, your father was still acting under it when those transfers occurred. That was it. The line we'd been circling. I remembered Dad saying once casually, your grandma wasn't doing well, so I had to step in and move some things around. That was months before she died. If they were using her signature to drain her money while she was alive under a POA, this wasn't just civil court anymore. This could be criminal. I ended the day with Calder's warning ringing in my ears. From now on, they won't just try to reason with you. They'll come for your name, your job, your integrity. He wasn't wrong. And for the first time, I saw my parents clearly not as people who loved me, but as architects of a lie they were willing to defend at any cost. I thought I knew the price of justice. Turns out I hadn't paid enough yet. The air in Calder's office that morning was sharp with purpose. Marisol sat across from me with a folder in her hands, her eyes steady. We're filing the civil petition today, she said, simultaneously opening a gate toward potential criminal review only if the evidence justifies. I signed. It was more than paperwork. It was a declaration. A cold acceptance that the road ahead wouldn't end with a tearful family dinner or a cheap apology. No, I was stepping into a fight. That same day we got a call from someone I didn't expect, Renee Carter. She used to care for my grandmother in her final months, a quiet woman who never overstayed her welcome. Renee had heard there was a dispute over the estate and said, I think I have something that might matter. We met at a dusty diner near Concord. She brought a worn spiral notebook, her personal care diary filled with neat slanted handwriting. I wasn't supposed to record things like this, she whispered. But your grandmother was clear. She talked a lot about your MBA fund. Said it was yours, not to be touched by anyone else. She was adamant. She pointed to an entry dated just a month before Gran passed. Left instructions again, MBA trust fund is only for Archer. Warned me not to let your parents near it. I sat there gripping the edge of the table, something inside me cracking. My grandmother's voice, even from the grave, had returned to stand by me. That notebook wasn't hearsay. It was a voice that couldn't be dismissed. Back at Calder's, Dana pulled me aside. We traced several financial transactions, she said, flipping her laptop around. Your parents began reallocating funds from Gran's accounts 2 weeks before she died during the period the POA was active. Marisol joined in explaining. If we can show misuse of power of attorney while your grandmother was alive, it elevates the case from civil mishandling to something closer to financial abuse. I remembered the funeral. Me in a black suit barely breathing. Them calculating, coordinating, wiring. It made my stomach turn. But we weren't done. Marisol executed our first tactical strike. She notified the mortgage underwriter handling Tinsley's dream home purchase. The down payment funds were under dispute, part of a condition-bound trust that had been accessed without consent. We weren't asking for anything, just informing them. Paul Denby, the underwriter, responded within hours. The loan file was flagged. Due to potential source of funds irregularity, the note read, we are pausing final approval until documentation is clarified. That moment shifted the battlefield. Because while I had been climbing uphill with law and logic, Tinsley had been floating on a cloud of granite countertops and open-concept dreams. Now the floor beneath her had cracked. Evan called me the next evening. I didn't answer, but he left a voicemail that said, everything, man, why are you going this far? You're blowing everything up, everything. As if I hadn't already lost it. I played it for Calder. He didn't comment, just saved the file. They're beginning to reframe the story, he warned. We need to stay 10 steps ahead. Then came the quiet warfare. P.I. Lyle Mercer showed me footage my parents circling my old apartment complex in Huntersville. A woman, my mom's friend, lingering near the mailboxes. One of my neighbors said a cousin had asked if I still lived there. It wasn't direct harassment, but it was encroachment. Marisol made it clear we document everything. This pattern helps us if we pursue a no-contact motion. Then a new crack formed. During a scheduling call with my parents' lawyer, she paused and said I need to request a delay. I wasn't informed of certain timeline issues with the transactions. She sounded surprised, genuinely surprised. Marisol muted our end and looked at me. Your parents didn't even tell their own attorney the whole story. It meant they were lying not just to me, not just to the court, but to the people meant to protect them. Desperation was setting in, and I had to maintain balance. Graham met me outside the office building the next morning, coffee in hand, calm but firm. Keep showing up. Keep doing good work. Don't let this bleed into the job. He was right. The corporate world doesn't care how tragic your personal life is. It wants results. So I kept showing up, running strategy meetings while depositions were being scheduled behind the scenes, checking numbers while lawyers checked documents, smiling through emails while my sister's dream home cracked inch by inch. And then the call came in. Tinsley's lender wants a full trace of all funds, Marisol told me. They're stalling the loan indefinitely, which meant the walls were closing in. Evan started pulling back. Tinsley, faced with the disintegration of her dream, responded the way she always had, by lashing out. Her messages to me started swinging between begging and blaming. We could have worked it out. You ruined everything. I needed that house. No mention of the fund. No mention of Gran. Just the dream. Marisol's final note before the chapter closed. If they start moving assets now, we'll need to file for a freeze. Calder, arms folded, added, now that the dream's collapsing, they'll do whatever it takes to make you the villain. I looked down at Renee's diary, then back at the silent phone. What else had they taken while pretending to grieve? We filed the motion to freeze their assets on a rainy Monday. There was something poetic about the weather, gray, heavy, unavoidable. Dana met me with a grim face that morning. They've fabricated a document, she said, or at least altered one. She laid out a scanned file, a family agreement signed by me. Except I had never seen it before. It claimed I'd agreed to allocate the MBA fund to help Tinsley with a down payment with full understanding and familial support. A tidy note written in sterile legalese. Marisol pointed at the signature. Yours is cut and pasted. They used an old lease agreement to lift it. The rage wasn't explosive. It was quiet, cold. They took my money. Now they're trying to take my consent. We submitted the forged agreement to the court as evidence of bad faith and possibly fraud. Then came the hearing on our emergency motion to freeze assets. My parents' attorney argued it was premature. Calder laid out the timeline transactions during POA, the forged document, the care diary, and emphasized the risk of financial concealment. The judge didn't rule right away, but she didn't dismiss it either. I'll issue an order this week, she said. Panic set in. The opposing attorney called us within 48 hours asking for a settlement conference. Calder refused. The terms haven't changed: restitution, written admission, interest, and no contact. Then came the depositions. My father tried to perform. Calm, stoic, a man burdened by ungrateful children. But as Marisol unpacked transaction dates, wiring receipts, and POA clauses, he cracked. His answers stumbled. My mother, less composed, let something slip. We thought it wouldn't be a problem. He's doing well, right? He didn't need it right away. That was it. Intent, revealed. They didn't borrow. They decided I didn't deserve. Days later, Graham pulled me aside. There's been a call to HR, anonymous. Said you're dealing with emotional instability due to family problems. Wanted to know if your role should be reviewed. I felt it in my gut. It was them. Graham nodded once. We've flagged it. It won't go anywhere. But it confirms something: this isn't family anymore. This is war. Word spread through the community, whispers at the church, side eyes at the club. At first they called me greedy, spoiled, ungrateful. But as the freeze order gained traction, as it became clear lawyers were jumping ship from my parents' side, the tone shifted. Martin and Lorraine are on their third attorney, someone told Graham. That's not a good look. Then came the collapse. The underwriter officially pulled the loan. Tinsley's dream home gone. Her school launched an ethics review. Evan's job placed him on administrative watch over the mortgage disclosures. The perfect facade cracked. And then the quietest rupture of all, Tinsley hired her own lawyer. She's distancing, Marisol noted. That house was her escape. Now she's jumping off the sinking ship. I moved out of my apartment. New building, gated, quiet. I changed my number, unlisted my information, filed the preliminary motion for no contact. P.I. Mercer had enough surveillance logs to establish a pattern of soft harassment. That was our next wall safety. As the chapter closed, Marisol sat across from me and said, "The final hearing's coming. The court will review not just the money, but everything: the POA, the forged documents, the retaliation." Calder added, "After that, we call the family together, on your terms. One final truth, and no more lies." I went to bed that night with Renee's diary under my pillow, because sometimes the only voice you need is the one they tried to silence. The morning of the final hearing, I reviewed the file once more and repeated the rule Marisol drilled into me: no emotion, only facts. Calder reminded me I didn't need to win with words. I needed to win with timing and paper. I wasn't numb. I had simply learned where to put the pain. In the courtroom, Dana presented the forensic timeline. Month by month, the transfers appeared on the screen, small, regular, deliberate, starting long before I ever asked about the fund. The idea that this was a temporary favor collapsed under dates and amounts. Marisol framed it plainly: a trust redirected with intent. Then the power of attorney came forward. Transactions made while my grandmother was alive aligned with the period the POA was active. Renee Carter's care diary was read into the record. My grandmother had said repeatedly that the MBA fund was mine and for no other purpose. The defense tried to argue confusion over wording. The diary ended that argument. Next came the story they'd spread that I'd volunteered the money. Marisol showed the messages to relatives timed before I even knew the fund was gone. The so-called agreement they produced unraveled under scrutiny: mismatched dates, borrowed language, a signature lifted from another document. The attempt to turn my consent into a prop only proved preparation. My parents faltered. Martin couldn't explain why the money moved monthly. Lorraine couldn't reconcile her deposition with the claim that they intended to repay. When the record noted they had laughed when I mentioned a lawyer, the room shifted. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was contempt. The judge summarized what the evidence showed: a breach of fiduciary duty, a pattern of conduct, misuse of authority, and efforts to mislead. Remedies were outlined: full restitution, interest, fees, and consideration of additional penalties given the intent and conduct. An apology would not close this. Afterward, I went back to work. Graham texted one line: "Keep the rhythm, don't let them narrate." All contact from my parents and their intermediaries went straight to counsel. I felt the cord cut. Marisol told me the final order would set the amounts and the no-contact terms, and that asset sales were likely. Calder said he would call a family meeting after judgment to end the lies publicly. I realized I didn't need understanding anymore. I needed safety. The final order came down clean and complete. The court required the return of the full $120,000 interest from the dates the funds were taken, and payment of all legal and forensic costs. Additional penalties were imposed based on intent, the POA period, and the fabricated consent. The numbers locked into place. I didn't feel triumph. I felt lighter. A no-contact order followed. No calls, no visits, no messages through others. Any attempt would route through counsel and count as a violation. For the first time in months, quiet felt protected. To pay my parents had to liquidate. The house they inherited, the symbol of stability, became the asset they sold to cover the judgment. Valentine turned cold. Club memberships were reconsidered. Roles at church and community groups ended. Invitations stopped. It wasn't vengeance, it was consequence. The house at Lake Norman collapsed entirely. The lender rescinded approval after tracing the down payment to disputed funds. Reviews followed. Tinsley faced an ethics inquiry at her school. Evan's workplace opened its own review tied to the loan paperwork. Their relationship cracked under blame and pressure. I didn't need their downfall to feel whole. Lies invoiced themselves. Calder convened the family meeting. He laid out a brief timeline: monthly withdrawals, The POA window, the care diary, the manufactured consent backed by the court's order. Those who once urged me to settle went silent, then spoke plainly. Support evaporated. The image of a model family ended there. My path closed cleanly. I received my MBA acceptance with merit support. Graham approved my leave and confirmed the role waiting after graduation. I moved to a gated place in South Park with clear access controls. Numbers changed, emails blocked, everything channeled through counsel. Life resumed its cadence. I kept one letter from my grandmother on my desk. Education is the one thing no one can take from you. My parents tried with money. I kept it with law and discipline. I don't cut them out to punish them. I cut them out to live. This wasn't just a fight for money. It was a fight to reclaim my voice in a family that once taught me silence was respect and loyalty meant erasing myself. For so long I carried the shame of being the difficult one, the ungrateful son, the problem child who just didn't understand how family works. But the truth is, I understood too well. I saw what no one wanted to name, that sometimes the deepest betrayals wear the kindest faces, and the people who raise you can still choose themselves at your expense. And that's where I'm going to leave it. Not with fireworks, not with revenge, but with something quieter. When the dust settles, what stays with you isn't the paperwork or the numbers. It's the moment you realize you're allowed to protect your future, even when the people closest to you try to rewrite it. Sometimes the kindest thing we can do for ourselves is to stop arguing with someone's version of us and start building a life that doesn't require their permission. If you made it to the end, I'm grateful you sat with this. Maybe parts of it felt familiar. Maybe it didn't. Either way, stories like this remind us that we never truly know what someone is carrying behind a calm face. So if you're listening and you've been through something that forced you to choose yourself, I hope you're giving that younger version of you a little grace tonight. And if you'd like a place to keep listening and sharing when you're ready, subscribe and join this little corner of the internet. Not as a number, but as someone who gets it. If you want to leave a few lines in the comments, where you're watching from, or just a simple "I'm here," I read more than you think. Thanks for being with me, and I'll see you in the next story.